Please welcome back to the stage, Bloomberg's Haslinda Amin.
Hello there. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Tech innovations are reshaping the future of business, finance, agriculture, and beyond. Over the next few sessions, we will hear from industry leaders on the groundbreaking discoveries that are transforming the world.
Please welcome to the stage, Arama Kukutai, CEO of Plenty, and Jose Ignacio Pelletero Ramayo, founder and CEO of GrowIn.
Well, we're talking agriculture, and it is complicated. Agriculture produces a third of global emissions. It consumes 2/3 of the fresh water in the world, and it is one of the most susceptible, vulnerable sectors to climate change. Add to that, you have the issue of a rising population. So we could be facing a food shortage. The question really is, how can you harness technology to do agriculture better and greener? Well, I have with me two entrepreneurs at the forefront of agtech or agricultural innovation. Good to have you with us. Arama, let's start with you. You're behind the company called Plenty. What exactly do you do?
So Plenty is a company that's, over the last year, 10 years I should say, invested close to $1 billion in really figuring out how to reframe and rewrite the rules of agriculture growing inside. And really what we've done is mastered the growing of plants, which can be used for many different things. Most people here have heard of vertical farming, probably think it's leafy greens or it's tomatoes, but it's much bigger than that. In fact, if we think about how our food is produced, less than 1% of it today globally is produced indoors. And yet as we look at the challenges of climate, we look at the challenges of supply chain, but also all the opportunities, frankly, to control plants perfectly to make the best tasting fruit and produce. Food ingredients, for example, that are natural, not artificial, and even all the way out there on the spectrum, making, for example, nutraceuticals, pharmaceutical ingredients, all of which can be made in plants. We really focused on building a technology platform, if you like, an operating system for indoor agriculture for the future.
Arama is a scientist turned entrepreneur, and you grew up in a farm, you're modernizing farming, and what you're doing, you've already commercialized it. I mean, you've tied up with the likes of Driscoll, Walmart. Give us a sense of how that is going.
So we have two of the world's most advanced vertical farms at scale. One in the city of Los Angeles, in Compton, which is producing leafy greens. Another one in Virginia, just south of Richmond, a couple of hours south of DC, serving the northeastern corridor, which is partnered with Driscoll's, producing strawberries. And really over the last year plus, we've been thinking about where do we take our first international step.
And Jota, of course, professional footballer turned entrepreneur. And he is behind the company called GrowIn. Jota, give us a sense of what you're doing there.
Yeah, thank you.
How you're disrupting agriculture.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to be here, because we are a startup company that we've been working on our tech last 2.5 years. We create a device that we make viable, cover all the length of a country with sensorical device to add and help the farmers with all that data we are collecting to make decisions, obviously to reduce the cost, because we see that now in the world, one of the problems we have is like farmers don't having that margins on his productions, and we need try to help them to more people, more young people like me want to join that industry, because people ask me, how do you change football to agrotech, because it's not a similar industry, but I think it's the future. And to be honest, I stopped football because I feel with that device we will help the world. And we can do that stamp, and obviously we are a business. We want benefits and profits. We will not lie, but we think we are in the front to lead a new generation of young people want to invest in the industry, young farmers. And the main point is make it profitable, because if not, people will not want to invest, young people will not want to work in the lands. And we are so happy that we are helping so much the world, and we are expanding ourselves to over the world.
Houta, give us a sense of what it actually entails. Is it a box?
Yeah, we create a device that we collect data. We collect nitrogen, phosphorus, sodium, salinity, conductivity, humidity, temperature, and we send it to our platform, to cloud, and from our cloud we send to the farmers how to use his resources best possible to reduce the fertilizant, because we are now fighting so much regulations in Europe. We have so many regulations about what they can use, what they cannot use, and obviously they was in the streets 5 months ago in Germany, Madrid, because obviously we need to take care of the world, but we need to take care of the farmers, because without the farmers, we don't have food. And I think if the countries don't have food, we have a big problem. We already have so many problems in the world. Kids don't have food, and we need to help them, because obviously they need take that regulations, but if we don't help them, it will be impossible to make an industry work, because they need profits.
It has to be cheap enough.
Yeah, that is, I think, one of the main things we are here, because we are a new company. We are 3 months ago on the market, and it's like we are now in a big stage with one of the most important people on the world in agrotech, one of the best investors and businessmen on that industry. Yeah, but we create one dispositive that only costs 175 euros, and the other technologies on the market, and it's not our technology because we have the IP rights, it's a new technology patented. Technology similar to us is close to 10,000 euros, and now we are creating reality to the governments to have all over the land the data, because before wasn't possible for the cost of the products and the technologies. Now we create that affordable technology and self-sufficient, because we work with energy solar, and you click it on the floor and you forget about it in 10 years. And now we think it's possible to give to the government the possibility of that data can be a national treasure, because we can prevent maybe in 10 years 50% of your land will be not fertile, and we can take the problem now and not with the problem is it, because when the problem is it will be so difficult to take the solution. But now we are trying it. We are now in Lebanon with Dr. Yola Shamoun working, Republic of Congo and some other countries. And we are very happy, but to be honest, we are still a young corporation, and we are trying to can demand the world we have now with some good investors, a strategy partner, because I believe so much on my vision, and for that I stopped my career, and some people was, you are crazy, you are winning money, and you stop to put your money and maybe lose everything.
But I want to pick up on one of the things though, that you said, which is, this is a new age for agriculture. Agriculture wasn't necessarily a vocation or a job that young people wanted to go into. It had this image of an aging population of farmers doing things the way they'd done them for centuries, millennia. And there's some truth to that, but what we're also seeing, I think, with companies like yours, like mine, is rethinking what agriculture actually is, the tools that we use. So there are opportunities if you're a data scientist to utilize AI, if you're in mechanical engineering, if you're like me in soil science. This intersection of really amazing technologies, and frankly, which agriculture is often leveraging from other sectors. We didn't invent GPS for agriculture, but every combine harvester out there can self-drive down a line using GPS. Robotics, which we use in our company, they're actually adapted automotive robots that we're using to pick up and handle large amounts of plants. And on the data science side, in our facility, we can create the perfect conditions for growing plants where we're getting decades of data every year. And one of our farms, we have 50 million data points, everything from light, every day, light, salinity, fertilization, plant growth. So this is, I think, maybe the most exciting thing is that we're seeing a new generation of talent come into agriculture because it's cool. Anyway.
We talk about funding. Hot is looking for funding, but you're well funded. How are you looking at scale, expansion? How do you bring this to the world?
Yeah, I think we're a technology company. We say you're a vertical farming company, yes, but fundamentally we've built a completely new set of integrated technologies, which has taken a lot of capital because we're doing fundamental R&D, at least for the first 5-6 years of the company's life. I was an early investor. I took over as CEO about 3 years ago and said, okay, right, now we need to deploy technology. And one of the things we have to do actually at the business level is figure out the right partnerships and the right capital structures to scale. So we're not using startup capital anymore, really. We're doing asset level financing. So we're using bank debt. In the US, we have a partnership with a group called Realty Income, who've provided us, $1 billion allocation for real estate finance because we have to build buildings. You don't want to be doing that with venture capital. So I think as you go through the growth cycle, different types of capital become more important. And I think what we're seeing in agri-tech is a maturing of the financing structures to grow companies. Let's remember, agriculture is a fundamental infrastructure business, just like energy. And the GDP flow out of ag and food last year was about 15 trillion in GDP. So when we think about building long-term infrastructure, we're talking in decades, really. So we started with an R&D proposition. Can we invent a new way of farming? We've done that part. We continue to invest in R&D for improvement. But now you get to the place where you have to scale. And you're seeing that with other areas like cultivated meat is another area, or using microbes and fermentation, again, to make food replacements. And for areas like this where you don't have a lot of arable land, these new technologies open up the possibility of having a new whole wave of agriculture.
Singapore's suddenly trying to do a lot more of that. How are you looking at scale, and what do you need for that?
Yeah, we are now facing one of the problems of growth too quick, and we need to take a seat to think how we will move on, because obviously with my past like football player, everything I do is a little bit more branding and easy to put in the wall. And when you create something that is new and so many people think could be the future, we are now talking with more than 10 governments. They are requesting us to add the technology in all the country, but to be honest, this is our best, so it's a good problem, but it's our biggest problem right now, that we have the technology, we can send the technology everywhere, but we need to take care of the technology and the quality. And now, without that VC capital or investment we need, without lost the control of the company, because I put so many hours, and I think the vision of the company is so clear, and I know where I want to go, and I am not in a hurry, but obviously we can lose the opportunity of that demand, because technology tomorrow can be another technology better than us, and this is from everything to anything is so easy on technology, and this is our biggest deal now to sort out, because I think in the next couple months, if we find that capital, we will be around 10 or 15 countries covering all the land, that this is so many devices. But now it is the biggest problem for us. But at the other point, because VC capital, now we are in an era that too many geopolitical problems, wars, and it's not easy to invest because you don't know what will happen tomorrow. And it's so many problems in Europe.
Well, that's part of the reshaping of agriculture. Just within our domain, you can say this about many industries, but really at least in the West, the post-war post-World War II order was really defined by the concepts of free movement of people, capital and goods. Well, we can't really say that's the world we're in today. So, there's a greater need for technology, I think, in agriculture to provide local solutions. And agriculture has always actually been local. That's why we have completely different farming systems in New Zealand, where I'm from, than we have in the Midwest of the USA or here in Qatar, where you have like incredible dairy production. If you'd said to me when, 10 years ago, we're going to have a 60,000 cow operation in Qatar producing dairy, I said, there's no way you can do that. And I'm an agricultural scientist in dairy, right? So guess what? I didn't know that there was going to be an answer that was very different from the one that we'd seen 10 years ago. And we're going to see, I think, that continue. The other thing I would say too is that R&D is incredibly important to our sector, and there's an immense amount of research and development done by universities as well as by companies in the agricultural space. And if we think about what the future in this region holds, I think there's an opportunity to do much more technology development. We've seen companies like Eat Just, for example, come and set up here, and many others besides. That is, I think, a really exciting area.
How are you continuing to innovate? Because we heard how Hata was saying that your technology may be irrelevant tomorrow. How are you ensuring that you remain relevant and build on what you have?
Yeah, I think we have a series of interlocking technologies, but really at the core is plant science. And that's actually very challenging. This is not SaaS software development, right? This is fundamental genetics and the conditions in which plants grow. And plants have evolutionary biology, in many cases going back 200 million years. So when we think about understanding plants, this is an area that takes time. We've been doing R&D for a decade. Good luck catching us, right? R&D is not free. So if we think about what is R&D really, it's science that's discovering new knowledge.
How much of your cost is R&D?
Probably in the range of nearly half.
Wow.
Yeah, we're the biggest R&D investor in indoor foods by far. And the reason being that we believe in the power of discovery. So science is discovering new knowledge. Technology is making a product out of it. Right, and we have that pipeline at fundamental science, and then we have a pipeline for making products. So if we think about really whether it's in biotech, whether it's big pharma, whether it's in ag, companies like Bayer, Corteva, Syngenta, there's nothing like that exists for the indoor ag world. And so we really aim to be writing the operating system, the fundamental product in science, which will involve also collaboration. So we already do licensing of our technology, for example. We're not trying to invent everything, but we want to be the best at what we do, which is growing plants indoors.
It's great to have a first mover advantage, but you have to remain competitive. How are you continuing to innovate?
Yeah, that's I told before. Yeah, we need every day keep working on the technology because
what's the vision, though?
Yeah, the technology is an improvement day by day because if you're working with a software, you will be day by day improving it. And when you have more data, we are working on artificial intelligence too. We have our artificial intelligence. And it's day by day. When you have more data, you will create a better artificial intelligence. But honestly, now we are not in that way that we are putting so much resource on improve and research. We are trying to have a research center, but now we are really focused on being on the market worldwide because we know and we have the problem in middle of that process. We have offers from big companies to buy us. But at that point, I believe so much on the project. I know what we have. They was working to have this on the market on 2030, and that's why people come to us to try to buy. But of course, we was outside of the equation because they was multinational companies, and we was like a startup born in Galicia, like in a small place. Yeah, but I think we are now really focused on civic, and I think governments are helping us because they start understand how important will be for their countries have all that data. It's like 100 years ago, gold was the biggest national treasure, but how you can control your country with data is not only for farming. You can use that data for everything. We are so surprised at how many companies and how many windows are open for us for work in other sides on other industries only for the data. I was really surprised. I think when I was in the process that we will make a big impact on agriculture, but I am really surprised how many things data open you the doors and with all the industries, and he will know better than me because he's a long time ago agrotech and he's one of the biggest on the world. But we are surprising.
I didn't plan to say this, by the way.
You need to get your respect. Yeah, but
something you said I think is critical is that it goes back to what we were discussing earlier. Farming is becoming digital, and it has been really over the last 20 years. But AI is opening up new tools to really understand data in ways humans can't. And we're seeing that in our environment, controlled environment, 50 million data. Our agronomists can't comb through all of that information, but in there are kernels of really high value that can actually help not just scientists in our farms, but the farmer out in the field make better decisions on what they grow every day. And one of the reasons why innovation has to keep happening is that for centuries we relied on the weather being consistent. It's not consistent anymore. We just had flooding in the UAE. Our family farm in New Zealand, which has never been flooded, got flooded by a storm. It hasn't had a flood in 120 years. So climate change isn't coming, it's here. And farmers have to deal with it.
Quick question just to wrap up. How long do you think it'll take for us to get to where we need to get to feed the world while still saving the planet?
Easy. Just the easy questions. Yeah. No. Look, I think the rate of innovation, the tools we have, are all there at our disposal. I'm convinced from a science standpoint, we can find the answers we need to feed the planet. I think what we face are some big challenges with mobilizing the capital at a rate where the innovation curve and the financing curves meet. So it's not enough to have. I've probably made it sound like Plenty's a technology company. We don't care about economics. Of course we do. We both have to run businesses that can be profitable, but it takes time to make breakthrough technologies. So you have to make choices all the way through that to make sure that, in 2050, when we've got 10 billion people on the planet, we actually have the tools available to feed the planet. And it's, I'm an indoor farmer these days, not an outdoor one, but we both need to bring those solutions to the farming community outside and to bring new assets to bear indoors. So.
Hata Arama, we're out of time. Thank you so much for your thoughts today. Been a pleasure.
Lovely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're in deficit already, and as the Fed weakens rates, almost any additional disruption can cause a very sharp upward spike in prices.
Please welcome to the stage Robert Friedland, founder and chairman of Ivanhoe Capital and founder, chairman, and CEO iPulse, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Eric Schatzker.
Robert, welcome back to the Qatar Economic Forum.
It's been a year, just like that.
It has. Folks, Robert, as you probably know, is in the mining industry. To be as successful in the mining industry as he's been, you need to be, of course, an entrepreneur, but you also need to be something of a philosopher. Wouldn't you agree?
Mining is not a business for intelligent people. It's very long term. It involves a lot of capital, a lot of patience, a lot of hard work, and the whole enterprise is becoming more necessary and more difficult at the same time.
You mentioned that we sat here a year ago, and indeed we did, I asked you then, Robert, on this stage, in fact, why the world hadn't woken up to the reality that it will need more, a lot more, raw materials, especially minerals, to electrify the planet and break humanity's addiction to fossil fuels. And I would say that in those 12 months, the world has, in fact, woken up to this reality, but not the way that you hoped it would. What we have instead is protectionism in the form of tariffs and sanctions. We have resource nationalism and a rush to achieve self-sufficiency. Where is this headed?
Only Allah knows. You're right. All of the things you said are true. First of all, everything we touch, we either grew it agriculturally or we mined it. And the development of the North Field here in Qatar is critical. The LNG industry is critical for the world if we're going to stop burning coal, for example, or if we're going to stop overutilizing crude oil. And so it's appropriate that we sit here right next to the world's largest natural gas field, which is going to provide the base load we need to have any hope of energy transition. So the problem is nobody even knows what energy is. This audience can't even define the word energy. So let's talk about that.
Well, what I'm getting at, and you know exactly what I'm getting at, is that for the moment, Qatar's LNG is welcome all around the world. The Europeans need it, of course, so do the Chinese for that matter. But what I was describing earlier on, and what you might soon be living as a mining entrepreneur, is the weaponization of the supply chain.
Yes.
Not just what you referred to last year, the militarization. We have the weaponization of the supply chain. And that's why I'm asking you, where is this headed? This is something I know you've given thought to.
Well, we're balkanizing the world economy. We had a beautiful, integrated, just-in-time economy 10 years ago. As an American, if I went to Walmart, everything said made in China. And today, we're developing a just-in-case economy. There is a degree of weaponization. Different groups are splintering, but fortunately, the economy is sitting here in the Middle East. They have a very young and highly educated population, and sit in the middle between the Chinese-Russian side with a little bit of Iran and the American-European side, and perhaps we can find a way to stabilize this rush that's rather aggressive and dangerous, and really becoming quite viral. Now, mining is part of the supply chain, and a lot of the fundamental demand for our metals, like copper, that used to grow primarily for electric cars or the electrification of the world economy, are now also in demand from the military, and the military everywhere. And we have to be realistic about this, and we have to find a way to cooperate and prevent this from getting completely out of control.
If this geopolitical trajectory remains intact, how does that affect where Western companies like yours want to develop and ultimately mine ore?
The best mineral potential on this particular planet that is not yet developed sits in Islamic countries, in deserts. We're no longer allowed to mine where it rains or snows more than it evaporates, because there's a danger of water pollution. You can see the controversy around a copper mine in Panama recently in that regard. But desert environments have a lot of metal. Saudi Arabia has a metal endowment, for example. Most of the Islamic countries, Pakistan, Afghanistan, have huge mineral potential. Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, parts of North Africa. So there are still parts of the planet that are underexplored with new technology, and it's possible for the mining industry to sustainably develop high-quality metal production. But there's no point in doing that if we're going to create a huge amount of global warming gas to mine that copper.
What I'm curious about is, if that's the case, this part of the world, up until now, has done a very effective job managing its relationships with the West, and principally the US on one hand, and China on the other hand. If the world's future copper supply lies here. And copper is, as some, including Jeff Curry, the well-known commodity strategist, has said, copper is the new oil. How do those tensions play out here?
I'm hoping that the young population in the GCC countries plays a buffer role between the West and the other side. I'm hoping that we find a way to cooperate or compete in a stable set of rules, because right now it's getting a little messy. If you start breaking down a beautifully integrated world economy, it's wildly inflationary. Right now, America is banning Chinese solar cells into the American economy, so that means solar cells are going to be much more expensive in the United States. And so we see this sort of phenomenon happening top to bottom. We're here because we're interested in finding partners from this part of the world that can help us access unexplored parts of the country where we need an appropriate partner. We're really trying to produce the metals we need to improve the global warming gas issue, but to do that in a green and sustainable way. That last caveat makes it really, really hard.
What changes, or perhaps doesn't change, if Donald Trump is elected president in November?
First thing he'll do is he'll probably start drilling for oil aggressively in the United States. The U.S. has a huge hydrocarbon endowment, both in natural gas and crude oil. And that would moderate energy prices and be quite a lift to the world economy. And
At a cost?
He'll probably stop subsidizing electric cars. Tesla really started off with U.S. government subsidies per car. There'll be a big change. And at the moment, the polls are indicating that that could well happen. We don't know for sure, of course. But this is another problem for the mining industry. We have to surf these kinds of political changes. We have to produce the metal at a very low cost in a very green and sustainable way. And we have to think decades ahead, no matter whether it's the Donald or not as the next president of the United States.
I do want to talk about electric vehicles. Irrespective of whether Donald Trump, were he to become president, eliminates subsidies, credits for the purchase of electric vehicles, demand for EVs has already started to wobble. It's decelerating, and if you're not BYD, or even Tesla for that matter, it's a question mark as to whether you can produce an EV profitably. Ford is losing some $100,000 on every single EV it produces. Do we, which is to say you and others in this room, need to reevaluate the assumptions that have been made about EV demand and ultimately EV sales?
We've been saying it's impossible for everybody to have an electric car. Literally impossible.
Well, the grid can't support it, right?
No, the grid can't support it, and we don't have enough, the battery technology isn't there yet. I think what we have in the United States is the early adopters have bought an electric car, sort of the techno geeks. But in China, there's a lot of adoption of electric cars, and so it varies from region to region. In the near future, there will be better and better battery technology. Gradually, that technology will improve, but this is the first correction in explosive growth. I think what we really need to look at before we build, say, 60 million electric cars in the United States is how we generate electrical energy and how we transmit it. Today, Texas has issued its 4th emergency, saying they might not get through the weekend on power supply. The grid could go down. The American electrical grid it's over 100 years old. And it's really not made for everybody to plug in an electric car at 5 p.m. anyway, which reminds this audience that America and Europe remain dependent on hydrocarbon from the Middle East for a long, long time. It'll be at least another generation or two before we truly get rid of hydrocarbon. What you're seeing is the first understanding of how challenging it is to change everything all at once.
I'm glad you brought up batteries, because I want to ask you about technological disruption in the battery industry. Much of the enthusiasm for metals like nickel and cobalt in particular has been born of electrification and the need, of course, to store electricity in batteries. But what if companies like CATL, the gigantic Chinese battery developer, are successful in replacing today's vanguard lithium-ion technology with something else, perhaps sodium-ion technology, or maybe even something along the lines of a solid-state battery or an organic battery, or even something else for that matter?
100% for sure, better battery technology is coming. We started with, well, we go back to lead-acid batteries, and then we had nickel hydride batteries, little ever-ready batteries, and now we have lithium-ion batteries. And definitely in 5 years, there'll be a whole new generation of battery technology. Out of MIT, the Americans think it'll be based on lithium metal. And once you have lithium metal, you do not need nickel, you do not need cobalt, you do not need graphite. So when you change the battery technology, you change the metals you need. And our problem in the mining industry is we have to hang around with the technologists and see where technology is going 5 or 10 years from now. And then we have to scamper ahead and get a hold of those metals and get them in production to enable anything to happen, because without us, all is lost. These lights wouldn't be on without us. And it's the same for the North Field, in fact. The whole world is dependent on LNG, and it's really important to emphasize the significance of LNG to the world energy market. It can't be overemphasized enough.
Robert, you made the point moments ago that if America were to produce 60 million electric vehicles per year, there's no way they could all plug into the grid, let alone in Texas, of course, where they're not sure they're going to have enough power this weekend. What about artificial intelligence? Consumes an awful lot of electricity.
So a lot of people get the idea that the internet is green. There is nothing whatsoever green about the internet. When you do a Google search, you take your little finger and go, boop, and you're using a quantum of electrical energy about the same as running a 100-watt light bulb for 10 seconds. When you do an AI search, boop, you're using up to 30, 35 times more energy, or enough to run that light bulb for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 minutes. And so as the world adopts artificial intelligence, the energy demand will go to infinity. Because if my drone coming to kill you has a lower latency than the other, if my drone is quicker, faster to find you with AI, you die, I don't. So the military demand for AI will go to infinity, the energy demand will go to infinity, and that will have to compete with things like crypto mining, which is another energy obscenity. Huge amounts of energy being sort of used up for nothing. In the gold mining industry, we use a lot of energy to mine gold. I think most of the world's gold mines could close today, and humanity wouldn't be materially worse off. The problem is that we have to get together and figure out what we really need. We definitely need an expansion of the North Field in the short term to maintain energy stability in Europe, because those pipelines to Europe were cut, Nord Stream 1 and 2. And we definitely need to find a way to mine clean metals to have any dream of an alternative. And the scale and the difficulty of the transition has to be discussed here.
Some people get that it makes sense to have more resources. There's a $43 billion takeover battle right now between BHP and Anglo American. How do you think it gets resolved?
Well, we know these guys. I have a very high opinion of some of the managers because we work with BHP at the moment. But it's irrelevant how it gets resolved, because the takeover in and of itself, a bigger fish swallowing a smaller fish, or the smaller fish turning around and swallowing the bigger fish, doesn't create any new mines. So that's all about copper. That's really the bigger fish is coveting the copper of the smaller fish. But you don't create any new copper on this planet you're really just picking which management team is going to develop that copper. And everybody knows we need copper. As we came in here yesterday, we were trading a nominal all-time high. But Goldman Sachs says we're just in the early foothills of the Himalayas on the copper price if we're really going to stop burning crude oil.
Well, the managers you're speaking of are, of course, BHP's Mike Henry on the one hand and Anglo American's Duncan Wanblad on the other hand. Do you ever worry that Mike Henry comes after you?
Oh, that's already been tried. That was reported by the FT. The fact that all the mining companies look at each other with a view towards consolidating shows you how hard it is to find a new mine. If it were easy to find a new mine, everybody would go out and get their own mine, and instead they're all coveting each other's girlfriend and trying to get her. But it's not creating any new girlfriends. So we're really 30, 40 years behind in finding new mines. Most of the money in the world went into internet and broadband and all kinds of other very exciting technologies. The mining industry has been underinvested for a generation. And it's only recently that people are waking up to the scale of the problem and the opportunity. And as a consequence of this, vast fortunes will be made and vast fortunes will be lost in people that don't understand the disruption we're facing. In war, the price of metals goes way up. If you study World War I, in World War II, we stopped making our pennies out of copper. We made them out of zinc because the copper was needed for the war effort. And you know how many bombs are flying around and missiles in the world. None of the copper in that weaponry is recycled. I'd like to see the world calm down and live peacefully. And my sincere hope is that it's the young people in the GCC countries that we're meeting have a very critical role to play because they're very well educated. These countries are very well governed, and they have the energy endowment. The combination of a young population and energy endowment, where else do you find that but in this region?
Robert, I began this conversation by talking, or saying at least, how to be successful, as you have been, as a miner, you need to be an entrepreneur first and foremost, but perhaps a philosopher as well. You're something else beyond those two, which is a disruptor in a way that I think many in this room might find a little surprising, given your background. Tell us about this way in which you're converting electricity, a new form, a new way, as it were, of turning electricity into power.
Well, everybody may be familiar. First of all, a lot of people don't even know what electricity is. Most people think electrons move down a copper wire. If we run a poll and ask people who think that, most people raise their hand. But it's not true. An electromagnetic field moves down a copper wire. So there's been a long debate in the United States between Thomas Alva Edison on one side and Nikola Tesla and George Westinghouse on the other side, whether the world should run on direct current or alternating current. And
that debate is well over 100 years old.
97% of the electricity humanity uses is alternating current. There's still uses for direct current, but alternating current took over the world. But there's a third way to use electrical energy, which has been used only for strategic weaponry and national defense, which is how electrical energy can be compressed with superconductors, supercapacitors. And you can take the quantum of energy it takes to run that light bulb for 10 minutes and squeeze it and release it in a few billionths of a second. And you get the power of a nuclear power plant for a few billionths of a second.
In a pulse.
In a pulse. That's called pulse power. And pulse power, we have the right to develop that on a license from the French government. And we've worked with the French government for 19 years. And this is a more efficient way to use electrical energy across a very broad range of human endeavor. So we believe we will commercialize this third way to use electrical energy, which is inherently much more efficient than the way we've used electrical energy in the past.
So I know there's much more to come on this, but why does it matter?
Well, you know, if you can, the basic industrial processes, making coal, making steel, the way we make automobiles are just, they use incredible amounts of energy. And a lot of the grid is burning hydrocarbon. If you go to the United States, 60% of the energy in our grid is non-renewables. It's coal or natural gas. If you can start having more efficient ways to make things with less power, you can shut off those dirty power plants and just stick with the cleaner ones. So it's very disruptive to have a new way to use electrical energy because we can just measure human progress and how much electrical energy we consume per person. So we're very excited to be at the bleeding edge of this. We've invested about $1 billion privately over a 20-year period. We've gotten support from the French government. And soon we're going to reveal this technology to the world. It has a lot of applications. And that's one of the exciting things we're talking about to our friends here in Qatar in this region.
Well, I know that you have I happen to know that you're putting a lot of your own personal time and attention into this technology and that news is forthcoming. Share with us what you can.
Well, you know, we've been a private company for over 20 years, so we're thinking about becoming a public company in the next few years. So we're retaining American bankers. We're a quintessentially American company. And we have a number of strategic investors that are joining us to develop this new way to use electrical energy. And it's very useful in the hydrocarbon industry. It's very useful in the agricultural industry. It's very useful to find water. There's a shortage of water in this part of the world. It's very useful to crush and grind rock with less energy, and very useful to make things out of metal, all with less energy. So before we leave just our footprints in the sand, we'd like to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. Life is short, and when you're a grandfather like me, you start thinking about the younger generation. And I feel very strongly this part of the world, the young people in this part of the world are going to be part of the solution. I'm super happy with the younger people I'm meeting here that are half my age, that are in positions of authority in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, and in the UAE.
As they say, watch this space. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert Friedland.
Thank you. Okay.
Please welcome to the stage Pierpaolo Barbieri, founder and CEO of Uala, and Ola Doudin, CEO and co-founder of BitOasis, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Jumana Bersecci.
So technology moves fast, as we know, but to borrow the old Meta, or Facebook it was called back then, motto, should it move fast and break things? How fast is too fast? And what can you do to make sure that innovation is actually serving the consumer's best interest? So we're going to talk about this. Really excited to have this conversation today because we are going to bring in two different perspectives, not necessarily different, but in terms of your background, what you're focused on, the companies that you run. Ola, I would like to start with you because, you know, when I think about disruption, obviously crypto has been the newcomer to the world in the last few years, and you only set up your exchange in 2016, has seen a great success since then. But the last couple of years have been a bit challenging, and namely because there have been a few high-profile cases, you know, fall from grace within that industry. And I just wonder, how can one distinguish between good innovation and bad innovation when it opens up the field to potential bad actors?
Thanks, Jumana, for the question. I'm very glad also to be here, part of the panel with both of you and QEF. So at BitOasis, for us, responsible innovation is part of our mission. We have a first mover advantage in the region, so we took it on ourselves to also be able to work closely with regulators, whether regulation exists or not, but be able to share the knowledge that we have in terms of how blockchain, crypto, and the innovation within the space works, and how to be able to responsibly allow the market to engage in the technology. So that was part of our mission from day one, and that's something that even myself as a CEO engage in talking to regulators across the region on continuous basis. Ultimately, blockchain, crypto, DeFi, I mean today sort of all bundled under the umbrella of Web3 is a technology and it's a tool. It can be used in positive ways to build applications in the financial services industry that allows for more access, that allows for more transparency, and also ultimately yield a lot of gains for industry players, retail, and investors. Or it can actually be used for illicit activities by bad actors, where essentially you see a lot of the be it hacking attempts or fraud or scams. And obviously in the last 18, 24 months, we've seen some of that in the space as well, where certain companies, because they were run by bad actors, ultimately exploded and caused a lot of losses for a lot of retail investors internationally. But that doesn't to say that there's an issue with the technology itself. It's basically how those companies are run, how they've leveraged that technology in their products, in sort of the services that they've offered for customers. So ultimately, regulators need to understand the technology itself and what are the activities that companies are engaging in offering that technology to customers. So what we find as best practices with regulators, and we've seen obviously success in that in the region, is focus on the activity and the products that are being offered, not so much that you regulate the technology or the protocol itself. It's like saying you want to regulate the internet. Well, that's going to be pretty tough because people are going to still have access to it. But if you kind of figure out the gateways and the people who are building those products and essentially productizing it and offering services to those customers in various ways, you could be a broker-dealer, you could be a payment service provider, leveraging blockchain or crypto. Then you start sort of looking into the activity and then figuring out guardrails around the activity to provide safe access and safe adoption.
Before we move to Pierpaolo, I do want to say actually that I'm going to put out a poll for anyone who's watching, and the question that I want to ask that we will go over throughout this discussion is, what are your main concerns of financial innovation? Is it data security? Is it lack of regulation? Is it risk of fraud? Is it possibility of a bubble? So while you're responding to that, Pierpaolo, I'm going to put the question to you. We talk about the use cases for technology, but it needs to be done in a way that is still serving people and protecting your customers. So what is the most effective way to do that, short of too much regulation, which I'm sure we'll talk about?
So we operate in a regulated industry. So going back to your original premise, we believe that we move fast. We have to move fast, and we have something urgent. Our urgency is financial inclusion. We live in a world where still almost half of adults in the whole country, in the whole world, don't have access to financial products. So they cannot save, they cannot protect themselves against inflation, they cannot even transact. So they live in a cash economy. In 10 years, that's not going to be the case. And we're very confident of that. So we want to move fast to provide services that are fair, accessible, and open to all those people. But at the same time, we're in a regulated industry, so we cannot break things. And so we took the view 4 years ago, we started 6 years ago, but we took the view 4 years ago that in order to win, we had to do the whole stack. And in order to do the whole stack, we had to be a regulated bank. Because the incumbents use regulatory capture to stop innovation, and we've seen that across a variety of financial services in the world. So in order to win, you have to be able to have the same license as them. And that is how we have a regulated bank in Mexico, we have a regulated bank in Argentina, and we have a regulated bank in Colombia. And so our 8 million users and growing have the confidence that they are operating within the guardrails of a regulated industry, but with the benefits of digital, which are accessibility, fairness, transparency, and real innovation.
Well, we just got an answer now. What are your main concerns of financial innovation? Data security is coming up top. That's interesting. Lack of regulation. We have risk of fraud, possibility of a bubble, probably right at the bottom. That's also a big question because there's so much talk about it. But data security, I'm going to put this question to you because I think you have to be mindful of it given the amount of data that you have aggregated on your systems. That falls somewhat into the domain of regulation, but not far enough. I mean, the regulators haven't gone far enough on data security protection, have they?
If you think about the banking industry, it's an industry that innovated very little in 6 or 7 centuries. Banks in the 15th century used to do loans on paper, and in the 20th century, they were doing loans on paper in a physical place in the middle of the city. That didn't change, but technology is radically changing that. And so in order to build our Uala score, which is our own proprietary data scoring for credit, we use a lot of data points, from your debit transactions with MasterCard to your bill payment, to your cell phone top-ups, even to your other information from your transactions on the phone. We need to be very safe about that, because that's an asset for the company, but it's also, more importantly, a human right for the individual to have that privacy protected. And so we believe in regulation in this space. And we want the regulator to take a very tough stance with other players in the market who are responsible with data. We don't think that that data should be open for sale. And it's up to the regulators in each of our jurisdictions to protect the individual and also to protect the companies. Because at the end of the day, that has to be shared. And we really believe that competition makes everyone better. So we share with the central bank, for instance, in Argentina, our credit data so that people can take their histories and go somewhere else. You got to win on product, not win on hoarding the data and not sharing it, because that is detrimental to society and to the individual.
Ola, I mean, the same question for you and how you think about data security, because the pitch for many of these crypto products is it's anonymous, decentralized. You can give me the full pitch here, but ultimately a safe space, anonymous space for people to transact. And yet you hear of cyber attacks, you hear of leakages. And I wonder how much of a threat that poses to the crypto ecosystem.
Yeah, I would say cybersecurity threats of different types is still an issue in the crypto space. I would put cybersecurity when it comes to safeguarding assets in crypto at a higher priority than data security. I mean, data security, obviously, and storing safely personal data and personal data protection laws that we're seeing maturing in the space as well. Obviously, that remains a top priority for us, but the main priority when it comes to cybersecurity threats is really safeguarding customer assets, because different to the banking industry, on the blockchain, once a transaction is issued, you can't call it back. So it's not like the SWIFT network where banks can collaborate with the sort of SWIFT network provider, central banks, et cetera, sort of to call back funds. In crypto, it's like cash. Once you lose the money from your wallet and someone steals it, you can't get it back unless you find that person and then sort of you negotiate with them. Obviously, that never goes well either. And because of the pseudo-anonymity of the network, it's hard to also identify who the person that compromised it. Obviously, there's analytical tools right now that are quite sophisticated on crypto that can collaborate with law enforcement agencies that ultimately can identify who the hackers are. I mean, obviously, there's sophisticated systems to do that, and some law enforcement agencies were able to successfully identify the cause of certain hacks, but that still remains an issue in crypto. And obviously for us as a regulated entity, so we're regulated under VARA in the UAE, and we also have our approvals as broker-dealer in Bahrain. The top priority for the regulators are also the safeguarding of assets, proper segregation, obviously, when it comes to custody controls. A lot of that because of the fallout of FTX and some of the sort of bigger players in the space that have majorly compromised, consumer protection in that area. I would say those are the top priorities in terms of risks. But also recent surveys here in the region, particularly across professional investors, they've quoted safeguarding assets and also custody measures as a top priority or concern for them to engage in this space as well. Obviously, crypto might be different to other financial technology verticals or banking because it's still an emerging space. Over a decade into the technology or blockchain coming to existence, we're still experiencing as an ecosystem, hacks that shouldn't actually happen with the sophistication of the regulatory, rules that we're seeing. So it's an evolving space, I would say.
I mean, there's also a super number of frauds and, laundering cases that happen in traditional banking system as well. So it's, it's a universal problem.
Exactly, yeah.
Pierpaolo, let me just ask you, AI, we've had an AI-themed day today, but you mentioned the amount of data that you collect. How is AI helping you be more efficient with that data analysis and collection?
Well, first of all, AI goes into a lot of the processes in machine learning for our credit algorithms. So to be able to issue more credit, what we want to do is to create everyone's credit score. And in societies where a majority of adults don't have access to the system, you have to build that with a lot of sources of information. And then AI is already helping us improve those credit scoring mechanisms. We're in the 6th version of our Uala score, and we hope it improves each new version. And I think that's really important for emerging markets because in many of these economies that are so cash-based, there is no real access to credit. And so that's a very good use. Then we obviously use it for customer service. We think it's going to be a revolution in customer service because you're going to be able to access conversational agents anytime, any place, with very specific questions answered really quickly. And that doesn't mean that you won't have human interaction. I think human interaction will be a really big differentiator and super important for the key relationships, because at the end of the day, we're a digital bank. We want the relationship to be human through the app, because that's our branch, if you will. But it frees the humans to do the more complicated, more important relationship building, and not to answer questions like, where was my last transaction? That's not value add. So AI will help us there. And then finally, it's also helping in the productivity of developers. And we talked about this a lot in the last few years. But over the last 18 months, it's become very clear that it differentiates the good developers from the better developers, making everyone, call it 20 to 40% more productive. And so the value of a great developer vis-a-vis a regular developer is much widened.
Ola, I think it was pretty clear when you talked about the regulatory environment that, and there are increasing amount of regulatory frameworks in the region. I know Qatar also, they're working on it too, for digital assets. I mean, so to what extent do you think that has brought in new entrants into the market, especially in the context of this crypto winter that we experienced over the course of last year?
Yeah, I think in the last year, we've seen more of that momentum picking up. Mostly, I would say, in the UAE with the introduction of the Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority in Dubai. I mean, in the region already had two mature regulators issuing crypto frameworks. So you had Abu Dhabi Global Markets, ADGM, Abu Dhabi, and then you had Bahrain as Central Bank of Bahrain. And those frameworks have attracted a number of regional players, such as us, and then some other international players. But I think what kicked off that momentum at high speed was definitely the Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority in Dubai. I think what we've seen with those frameworks is they're definitely focused on responsible innovation, but also to some extent leaning towards experimentation in certain areas where there was sort of more focus on Web3 applications, NFT applications, and to some extent more catered towards retail products versus institutional products. I think there's a bit more focus on institutional products in ADGM. So I think that sort of fresh outlook to regulation ultimately encouraged more international players to come into the region, while seeing obviously some other jurisdictions taking a much more conservative approach, if not a crackdown approach to regulation. I mean, there were cases in the US where you've seen regulation through enforcement, which is really bad news for, good players even, where there were cases, some players in the US had to essentially deal with SEC and pay towards certain fines without clarity of regulation. So I think that sort of play of providing clarity of regulation has yielded benefits to those jurisdictions. I think in Qatar we're seeing similar focus on tokenization as well, tokenization of real-world assets. But I think it's very difficult to pick and choose in crypto, given the global nature of the protocol itself. It's hard to sort of single out crypto and just want to sort of focus on one vertical because it is part and parcel of the full ecosystem. Yeah, I'm not going to ask you where the price of Bitcoin is going, but because that's a typical question, and that's not what you hear. But there is, there have been a few developments in the crypto space with the launch of ETFs, and I do wonder how that has altered the outlook for the year for cryptocurrencies, the direction of cryptocurrencies. Yeah, I think that was definitely a positive move and signal for the industry, given what the industry has experienced as setbacks after 2021. So I think getting that confidence vote, from regulators in the sense that they've approved a Bitcoin ETF in the US had a spillover effect on the industry internationally. There's a direct impact on the price. I think we've seen some of that. I think now there's an expectation that more capital is going to go into the space. And ultimately, with more capital, there's the price prediction obviously changes, and there's more sort of, I would say, positive or bullish view of the asset itself. And then ultimately, it's a confidence vote for other investors that might either want to go directly into the asset or indirectly through a Bitcoin ETF. I think in the region, though, even a recent survey said that close to 70% of professional investors, it was done across the GCC with focus on the UAE, but 70% of professional investors wanted exposure into crypto. I think that, I wouldn't say it was only because of the Bitcoin ETF. I would say primarily it was the clarity of regulation that ultimately professional investors would want. And then added to that, the Bitcoin ETF signaled even sort of more bullish sentiment towards the assets. So it all sort of, leads to the same
Pierpaolo,
thing.
I'm going to end on you and take it back to something that you said it right at the beginning, which is, financial inclusion is really important for you, and especially in the markets that you operate in. Argentina is one of them, and of course, you've got a new president in Argentina now. I'm curious to see how, as a business leader on the ground, things have evolved ever since Milei came in.
Well, Argentina is undergoing a very big change, and I think this election showed that people wanted a regime change after almost 20 years of a very different type of economic policy. And I think that the inflation rate was so high that people got tired of it, and they chose somebody whose main message was, I'm going to defeat inflation, and I'm going to create the first fiscal surplus in almost 20 years in Argentina. I was reflecting this morning that it's pretty incredible that this year Argentina will have a lower fiscal deficit than Germany, the US, or China. I mean, that's where they're going. And that creates interest from the world. I mean, we've seen more interest in Argentina and our business in Argentina over the last 3 months than over the last 3 years, in the sense that people want to increase their exposure to Argentina, and we see asset prices reflect that in a way that they didn't before. Of course, there's a lot of reforms that need to pass. Argentina needs a structural reform, and it needs to open up so that areas like mining or energy and even the knowledge economy can really grow after a decade of not really growing in real terms. But I think the goal of reducing inflation is a very worthy one, and structural reforms are necessary so that growth can come back.
That's a good place to leave it. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Please welcome to the stage Michael J. Biersick, founder and CEO of Q Control, and Rajiv Hazra, CEO of Quantinuum, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Linda Amin.
We've been talking about quantum computing for about 65 years. And it's a journey riddled with setbacks. But now there seems to be renewed optimism, even capital, that we're getting somewhere. Are we? Raj, let's start with you. How much closer are we to having a quantum computer?
Well, it's great to be here, and thanks for that startup question. The question is a little bit misplaced, because we have a quantum computer. It is being used for real work. The real work is defining exactly the use cases and how to approach those use cases in the near future. So the basic question is, quantum computers are no longer on benches and science benches and in labs.
But it's not a quantum computer that we envision to solve existential problems.
We believe we are within 2 to 3 years max of being able to solve large-scale problems, not just of theoretical interest and PhD-generating theses, but things like how do you get to generative chemistry and go modify molecules to affect, catalysis events in fertilizer generation. That's a $70 billion business. And if you make a 2% change in the time to solution, that's billions of dollars.
How close are we, Michael?
It's funny, without coordination, we have exactly the same number, 2 to 3 years. But
what's different this time around? Why 2 to 3 years?
There's nothing different this time around. Maybe the only thing that's different has been the attention span of people from the outside who jumped from quantum computing to blockchain, to AI, and now are looking for something else because AI isn't panning out the way they originally anticipated either. Meanwhile, in the background, the people doing the hard yards have been on this continual, up and to the right trajectory. The machines get bigger every year, and I'll emphasize, these machines exist. You can run quantum programs on quantum computers and get real useful answers out. Now, the trick is, they're still a little small. They're a little bit too small to beat the best supercomputer. But we're legitimately talking about comparing today's quantum computers to the world's biggest supercomputers. That's the kind of comparison we make. And it's this next couple of years as the machines get bigger and then we help them get better from our technology, that we actually cross this threshold. And you as a user say, no, I'm going to choose the quantum solution instead.
You talk about it when the machines get bigger. Right now, just to put it out there, that quantum computer looks like the size of a fridge. Is that right?
So yes, but I think, so when I say bigger, I don't mean
More powerful?
all the infrastructure.
Okay, let's
right?
talk about that. Right now, it is what, 100 qubits?
Yeah, so a qubit is the information carrier, right? You should think of a qubit like a quantum transistor in a sense. But you can't just compare how many qubits to how many transistors, right? You have 10 billion transistors on a chip these days. You can't say, well, you've only got 100. It's about what that enables, what problems that enables. Now, 100 qubits, the kind of state-of-the-art average across the community, is still a little bit on the small side to deliver that advantage that we're looking for. But we think advantage only comes with around 900 to 1,000. So this is not infinitely far away. This is on the roadmaps of various teams in the next couple of years.
And Michael, I think the key thing is just not how many qubits you have, but how usable they are. In classical computing, that's like saying, I give you more cores, but the cores are deterministic. If I said, I give you more cores, but they're likely to fail more often, you might have a different view of how many cores you need versus usable cores you need. Our view is it's not a race to qubits, it's a race to the fidelities that are achieved so that you can trust the computation that you just did. And time to solution, because what quantum computing is generally you're running probabilistic problems, you throw it at it several times and you observe what the output is, or you throw it once and observe what the output is in a probabilistic sense. And time, the economic value is how long did it take to get the right answer for me? And that is not affected by just qubits. It's affected by how useful, how resilient, and how fault tolerant those qubits are.
So could I double click on that for a second? It may be a surprise if you're not an expert who spends your days looking at quantum computing. Quantum computers are very fragile. So when Raj is talking about fidelities and fault tolerance, he's really addressing the fact that a classical computer, the one in your laptop or your mobile phone, that can actually run for about 1 billion years. I'm not joking, it can run continuously for about 1 billion years and never be expected to suffer a hardware fault. A 1 turns into a 0. If it fails, it's because of software. In quantum computers, community average, it's more like 1/1000th of a second. That's about the average. So we have a lot of work to do to make the machines more stable. And this is where almost all the R&D comes in. That's what my company, Q-Control, focuses on, stabilizing the quantum computers so we can solve bigger problems.
So where are we with that?
It's happening right now, right? There are amazing results that are coming out all the time, solving real problems, where in the case of the commercial engagements we have with, say, IBM, our software is the difference between the quantum computer being no different than a random number generator, actually choosing randomly, or actually giving you the correct answer 100% of the time on a logistics problem that is relevant to scheduling and routing and all sorts of industries. So real problems.
I agree with you, Michael, that it's a combination of hardware and getting better and smarter and smarter software that will lead to these very large-scale systems. We're focused on both because the better the hardware is to begin with, the easier it is to get the correction done with lower kind of pain or overhead or tax, if you believe. We see machines today. We have 2 generations of machines now, which are being used by very leading market-making companies in different end markets, running real problems. Airbus and BMW, looking at solid fuels and the next generation of chemistry that is going to be required at chemical accuracies to figure out what the chemical reactions are in these going to be. So someday we get a 1,000,000-mile battery.
We talk about how, well, you talked about how there's already a quantum computer and that's solving problems. When it comes to qubits, we're looking at 100. Some say 10,000 is quite a critical number. Others say we actually need to get to 1 million. Give me a sense of what 10,000 allows you to do, what a million allows you to do?
So I'll say the answer is actually, it depends on what problem you're trying to solve. There's nothing that says you have 1 million qubits and you've achieved the nirvana of quantum computing.
We talk about wanting to solve existential problems.
Yeah, but let's take one around, if you're doing supply chain, large-scale optimization problems. What you need are good, solid, somewhere between 50 and 100 logical qubits, right? Again, the scale of the problem. Training AI models, 100+ logical qubits. This is where, when I said logical, it's what Michael just said. These are the qubits you trust. So they've been error-corrected. And what we believe is the people who build, like us, the best-in-class physical qubits, apply error correction on top. You get to, if your ratio of physical to logical is 10 to 1 versus 1,000 to 1, you can get there in the next year or two with 500 qubits, giving you 10 logical qubits that you can use.
So sometimes our discussion gets taken away by the fantasy side of what you can do with quantum computers because it sounds so exotic. But in practice, you can actually solve important, less sexy problems that actually make the world go round. So we did a bit of work with the Australian Army, and the Australian Army works with the US military, and they do a joint military exercise that involves moving materiel on surface streets from all these different depots to the location of this exercise. It's called Talisman Sabre. That's a problem that is, there are commercial solvers out there. The Australian team will not use any commercial software because they don't trust that the results will meet their risk tolerance. So they literally have staff sergeants with pen and paper and with spreadsheets solving this problem. The issue here is that problem is amenable to quantum computers and it is underserved by conventional technologies. So if a quantum computer can give a better answer, even if you can't prove it with a math proof, if you can show me instead of telling me that it's better, then that's a real win in areas that matter, in national security, in industrial logistics, in oil field management. In all of these different industries, that threshold of when you win is close and the advantages are extreme.
Before I follow up on that question, that answer, you talked about how it's clouded by fantasy. What's fantasy? What won't quantum computing be able to do?
Quantum computing is not magic pudding. Right? There's an Australianism about the magic pudding that you keep eating it, it's delicious, and no matter how much you eat, it's still there. It doesn't solve everything. It doesn't fix everything. It doesn't replace all computers. It is a totally new kind of computer that complements what we already have. Just like GPUs complement CPUs. And we've seen NVIDIA become a $3 trillion company based on this admittedly niche technology that they totally dominate in the market. Quantum computers, in my view, I don't know, Raj may have a different view, look to be similar, that there'll be a specialized accelerator, but they provide the computational grunt that solves the real hard problems. So the fantasy comes in the narrative that they just fix everything, that problems are no longer hard. That's not true. There are still hard problems, but quantum computers can help address them, just like GPUs helped unlock AI.
Raj?
I agree. It's a hybrid infrastructure where classical and quantum are going to be used, but I want to be very clear that the quantum portion is not just about creating a faster computer to do classical methods. Quantum gives us the ability to look at physical interactions in a way, and then from that create new physical things that you couldn't have done before. Quantum computing allows you to model, for instance, carbon dioxide molecule, to then create a material that will absorb it very effectively for carbon sequestration and sustainability problems that you couldn't have done with any other tool. So I agree with you that there's a kind of feeling that quantum is just the faster computer, the fastest supercomputer that'll solve everything. What it is, its beauty is, of course, it'll do some problems more effectively than classical computing, but it will allow us to do things that classical computers have never been able to do. And that is the beauty of creating more nature, right? New molecules, billions of dollars from personalized medicine, from personalized fuels and fertilizers. You never go out and get a prescription for a painkiller or an antibiotic. It generates the specific medicine for you because it understands the chemistry, your body chemistry, and its interaction with drugs.
Michael says, show, don't tell, it's hard to prove, correct? But therein lies the problem for investors. They want proof, and how do you convince them? How should they be looking at it? Because obviously, you need a lot of funding for this to get to $1 million and beyond.
It's a roadmap. It's not for every investor. I'll be upfront. It's for those that see large markets like generative chemistry, which is, in our estimation, north of $1 trillion market. If you look at all the end markets being served, from pharmaceuticals to chemicals in it. And then look at the milestones that say, is the technology achieving the promise that is required to get to those markets, and are those tipping points in the markets forming? That's what we are seeing today in many of these end markets, right? When we say we need X amount of size of a machine, if you will, capacity, it's not a big bang theory, right? That when you get to that, you suddenly have something. You can show things, you can show steps along the way that are provable, demonstrable, and they are in line with solving the larger scale problem. You solve problems at different scales. So confidence building in the technology in the context of a massive market, which will be disrupted by this approach, is absolutely possible today, and we are doing it. We just closed a very significant funding round with exactly those kinds of demonstrations of key market makers on large-scale use case problems, and the progress we've been able to make from going to a dream to demonstrating solutions at lower scale.
I mean, I agree with this. I mean, the first thing is that the technology is showing consistent, very substantial gains year on year. Whether that meets the timeline that a particular investor expects for their fund, for their thesis, that's a different question. I think of it this way. Would you in the audience, maybe some of you were quite prescient, but would you, looking back, had you not been so clever, would you have really loved to be in OpenAI and NVIDIA 6 months before everything blew up, 6 months before AI hit? You would be, if you're not already a billionaire, you would be a billionaire today. And that kind of opportunity, it can come if you're willing to weather the long path. NVIDIA is a 20, 30-year overnight success, right? They needed people behind them, and obviously the public market after a while, to support them as they continue to develop their technology and grow the market. I think the same is true in our sector. If you want the outsized rewards, if you want to be on the right side, the early side of the next OpenAI, the quantum version, then it means that your investment thesis has to be compatible with a longer time horizon.
If I understand it right, when we do have this quantum computer which we envision, it's not like everybody would have access to it, right? Those who want to have access to it will have to pay perhaps for the service of using that quantum computer. That's correct?
Well, you have to pay for a mobile phone, don't you? Right? You don't get things for free.
Is that problematic? Would that lead to even greater inequality, for instance? I mean, how do you envision, what are the cons to this?
I look at it this way. It is a very, very potent value creator, and therefore having to pay for a high value asset in the light of the values it could, think of again, a whole set of drugs for a disease that has not been tamed till yet. It's enormous, the potential. The advent of quantum computing in an era where cloud is pervasive is a very good way to democratize access. Right? Again, there are some challenges with data gravity and where you have the data, but in general, the technology behind making sure this isn't haves and have-nots is available today. We use it. The value part of it, whether it goes to everybody or not, really depends on whether they see value in it or not, whether they can derive value from it or not. And the transformative things that we believe, and we are seeing quantum computing now starting to deliver, that is going to drive a different value equation. And we believe it once, just looking at the history of high-performance compute, for instance, that when societies are benefited at this scale from in energy transitions, to sustainability, to pharma and health, that value will be shared and will flow down to every aspect of society.
Last word on this, openness and engagement are the way we do this. Our community has driven very hard on making quantum computers available to the cloud, making software tools for performance management available to everybody on the cloud. The thing that will hurt us the most, that will lead to the greatest inequality in a really negative sense, is techno-nationalism. There's a difference between having national pride and wanting to invest in assets. That's a good thing. But when it comes to closing off your assets and preventing others from engaging with them, that's where we end up with the problem in this emerging technology.
Fascinating. We'll have to come back next year and assess where we are.
Yes.
Right? Raj, Michael, thank you so much for your thoughts today. Fascinating.
Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Shurick Agapitov, founder and CEO of Xsolla, and Jayesh Maganlal, Chief Information and Digital Officer of Roshan, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Abi Abu Omar.
Shurick, Jayesh, thank you so much for joining me to this discussion about the metaverse, a topic I think is super exciting. But before we start, I just want to remind the audience that at some point, we're going to have a poll question. Prepare your phones to answer the question. Shurick, just starting with you, I want to talk to you a little bit about Xsolla and what you're doing and what the company is doing in the metaverse.
I think there's something over the microphone.
All right, cool. Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Just nod your heads. I can see you. Cool. Shurick, just starting with you about Xsolla and what you're doing in the metaverse space. Well, I mean, talk to me a little bit about your vision for it. What exactly is the vision when it comes to Xsolla and what you're trying to do in this ecosystem?
Thank you for having me. So Xsolla is a company who create solutions for video game commerce. If you play in Fortnite or Roblox, you might find my company name on your credit card bill. I believe the metaverse, it's a form of the future internet. And it's going to be built with video games technology on the front end and maybe blockchain technology on the back end. And it's not just the virtual environments. It's like in real life, we have spaces, stuff, and people. So in the virtual worlds, we already have that. But in the metaverse, we're going to have the virtual environment, virtual items, and characters. In other words, the future of the internet, what excites me the most is not the Web3, it's a Web 3D.
And Jayesh, I think what Roshan is doing in this space is quite exciting. You're incorporating property sales with the metaverse in Saudi Arabia. Talk to me a little bit about how that is working out. What are you envisioning here?
So thanks for having me here today. What we have built in Roshan today essentially is a complete end-to-end sales platform that we have today, right? And to our surprise, we've seen people actually buy homes online, and this is a behavioral change, and that's a non-immersive experience. And today we're looking in adding the immersive experience because what we sell are homes that are off-plan. Visualizing them is very difficult. Today, all you see is 2D drawings. You see spaces that are 4 meters by 4 meters, but it's very hard to imagine for an end user. So bringing the metaverse onto that gives people a full immersive experience in terms of what the walkthroughs of the communities are going to be looking like from the outside and inside the homes as well. But incorporating that with the sales journey that we've kind of built will allow people not only to render the space, understand the space that they are going to be purchasing, but also to be able to customize them. You don't like certain furnishing, you want to kind of change the floor tiles, for an example, you have all of these options within the metaverse. And being able to check that out and finish your sales journey and actually be a property owner. So that's one of the first use cases that we are looking into, but we're also looking into mini apps within the metaverse, so bringing sporting events, football, tennis, and so on and so forth within the realm. And of course, we've got other use cases that are coming up to be able to do retail transactions and stuff like that, and also customer service within the realm of metaverse.
Okay, and sticking with you, first of all, I want to know when this product would come to market, and when you'll see yourself start to sell property based on people seeing it in the metaverse.
So we hope to launch later this year the first MVP of the platform, and likely towards the end of the year or maybe early next year, we'll start transacting onto the platform. But nonetheless, our current digital platform already allows that to happen. So you can actually buy a Roshan home completely end-to-end on the platform.
And Shurick, coming back to you, and I guess, a follow-up to you as well, Jayesh, but when it comes to resources and investment and money allocation, does it feel like the metaverse has taken sort of a backseat to generative AI since ChatGPT was, came to market?
In my opinion, yes, definitely. And the reason being is because of the popularity and the ease of use of generative AI. It's more consumer-driven. There's a lot more interest from the public. There's a lot more interest from the investors. You see a lot more startups being born that are focusing on generative AI. But nonetheless, the metaverse is still very dominant. It's going to be there from a long-term perspective, but from a short-term perspective, yes, generative AI is definitely taking the lead for now.
Shurick?
Imagine in the future, you're walking on this 3D websites, which I call meta sites, and you can meet a non-player character. And because of the AI, those characters could be much more compelling when the, let's say, robot representative, what we today have on the 800 number. So I believe in the future, brands going to have their brand representative, brand ambassadors in those virtual worlds, and AI is enabling that. And I believe that's going to be very compelling and deep connections, opportunity for the brands to connect with the audience.
Okay, and before we get to our next question, I just want to bring the poll question to the audience now. And the question is, what would you use the metaverse for? And you have 3 options there: create an alter ego, try out extreme sports, or travel the world without moving. So I'll allow the audience some time to sort of answer that question before we bring the answers and get back to you guys. But moving on with this conversation, Shurick, sticking with you, about the widespread adoption of the metaverse. A lot of applications feel like meetings with avatars right now. I certainly tried, using a VR headset to do an exercise class. It didn't go very well, but. I mean, companies that are now trying to be innovative with gaming and entertainment, such as yours, and you mentioned Roblox in the beginning, they seem to be having trouble finding new ways to grow their platforms. So where do you think is growth going to come from? And what is the tipping point for really widespread use of this tech and wider participation in the metaverse?
So today, metaverse companies, which is represented by Roblox and Fortnite, they actually, I call them virtual worlds, not the metaverse. The metaverse is the only one, it's like the internet. And the truly metaverse moment is going to happen when you can walk through the portal from the Roblox to the Fortnite, carry some of the items with you, and that's similar like a hyperlink, and it's going to be internet of the future.
Jayesh?
So I think I go back in history, right? So if you look at, a movie back in 1985, Back to the Future 2, you started seeing characters wearing virtual reality glasses, right? And here we are today, and that was supposed to be 2015. Cars flying, everybody's on the VR glasses, but Nonetheless, 9 years later, we are still here today. You see Oculus, you see MetaQuest, you see Apple Vision as a product. People are using it, right? But you also see the generations of teenagers between the age of 12 and 18 who are on Roblox, who are on Fortnite. And given the fact that both are moving in parallel. So you're going to see improvements in terms of the form factor of these devices, which is going to get smaller, which is going to get faster, which is going to be more affordable. And you're going to get this generation who's been playing Fortnite, who's been playing Roblox, and the virtual world comes very naturally to them, and it feels very natural for them to be on the platform and to do things on the platform. So the intersection between the hardware and the platform coming in a couple of years or maybe the next decade is going to be a perfect intersection where the adoption is going to skyrocket. And that's in my opinion, because you have the demand, you have the devices, spatial computing is going to bring metaverse and the virtual worlds to a whole new experience. So you're going to get widespread adoption at the point of time.
I want to add, VR headset is just a subset of the metaverse, maybe tiny subset of the metaverse. The future of the metaverse, it's a connections between virtual worlds and the physical worlds. So you can easily imagine you can use digital items in the physical worlds. Think about like a coupon codes, or some loyalty points. It could be in the form of the digital items. So you can, everywhere you go right now, you're accepting the cookies. I can easily imagine in the future, every time you visit this website or location in a physical world, you can accept the token of appreciation for your attention in the form of the digital items, which is going to unlock some benefits later on.
Right, and Jayesh, coming back to you about something that you mentioned, and certainly what it feels like, who's occupying this space right now. Your idea is, what Roshan is doing with this space is quite, it's brand new. I certainly have never heard of a company selling property, bringing in, what the property would be envisioned into the metaverse. We're based in the Middle East. You're based in Saudi Arabia, and we spoke about this a little bit backstage. When it comes to off-plan sales and incorporating the metaverse into this, into clients purchasing them, do you think the region is quite ready for this idea?
Absolutely, and I think if you look at Saudi Arabia, penetration of mobile phone usage is almost close to 100%. Right? The median age of the general population is at the age of 25 to 30 years old. So the adoption of technology is very high, and people in nature are very visual. People like visual aids. People like things that are more appealing to their eyes. So I think yes, the region is definitely ready.
Right. I just want to bring back the results for the poll question to see what the audience voted on. So create an alter ego got 13%, try out extreme sports 47%, travel the world without moving 40%. Jayesh, I think we need to add buy a property and see what the audience would vote on. But what do you make of these? What do you make of these results, Shurick? I'm interested in your thoughts.
Well, I am actually not surprised. Trying extreme sport or playing the action games, that's what video games for today. I think in the metaverse is going to be just much more engaging and connected.
Right. Coming back to our conversation about some problems that we've seen in the space lately, such as harassment and disinformation. I want to hear both of your thoughts about what you think can be done to mitigate those risks in the space. Shurick, starting with you, maybe?
I don't think the metaverse is radically different than the internet, and every regulations and rules what we currently have or we want to have in the internet is going to be applied for the metaverse. It's a moderation, parents control, and I think it's endless debate and about the rules and regulations.
And would you consider putting protections in place to again decrease the risk of such risks? What would those protections look like?
There's a complexity of the law, and when you have a multinational business, and metaverse, I hope is going to be multinational projects similar to the internet. So with laws which regulated today's internet activities and the rules of the platforms, and it's some of the people who are doing business on internet is complaining about laws and regulations and complexity of that. In the video games, what we learn is like, in addition to that, we also have the rules and terms and conditions of the platforms on the mega platforms, which is updating very often, and it's not consistent from Europe and the US. And Apple rules is changing like, I think twice a week now, and we monitoring that, and it's very important for the businesses and very critical for the businesses to do that.
Right. And Jayesh, when you started this idea in your company, did you look at those risks? Were there sort of, was there a strategy to sort of mitigate those risks from being applicable to your platform?
I think because our systems, the ideology behind what we want to build is slightly more closed. It's more ring fence, so there's slightly more better control in terms of who's on the platform or what they can do.
Right.
So we don't have widespread bigger problems like what would you face on a general metaverse on the net. So I think that's slightly of an advantage to us that we can control in terms of what we do on a platform perspective, and because we're introducing a very different concept, but the idea behind that is to really ignite and accelerate the sales on the platform, right? Rather than being the social element of it, which will be probably slightly later once we bring the social element to that, and then that's probably we may need to learn from the industry in terms of what are the best practices to be applied before we enable those features.
Right. One of the things we're finding with the heavy new technologies such as the one we're talking about right now, like generative AI as well, and crypto, is the impact they're expected to have on energy use. Is this something that you're considering? Is this something you're looking at? Is this something you're actively trying to tackle? Jayesh, maybe starting with you.
Yeah, so for me, from a consumer end perspective, right, we work with the big technology providers out there. We work with the large hyperscalers out there who have the same agenda of providing green computing and providing energy efficient computing to customers like us, right? So working with the likes of Amazon, Google, and Microsoft as well. Who have their focus on providing really energy efficient. And of course, we look into hosting slightly closer to the region, so ensure that we can host it as close as within the country. And last but not least is also to ensure that the way we host our computing facilities are also based on schedule, based on containerization, where we can really eliminate waste on the cloud as well. So.
Yeah, Shurick.
I think all the technologies enabling the metaverse is already here. The scale and distribution of it, it's critical for the metaverse success. The 5G technologies and graphical chips for the rendering photorealistic virtual worlds is not large enough to onboard the billions of users to the metaverse. But all the technology is here. The biggest challenge is going to be connectivity between the businesses and come up with the standards. How two businesses going to work together to become this new internet standards and carrying the items from one virtual world to another virtual world and many others challenges.
And I guess one more bonus question for the both of you, again, about regulation. We've seen a lot of, what's been happening around regulating the AI space. Do you think there should be more or less, or, current regulations on the metaverse space? Are they sufficient? What do you think, Shurick?
I believe regulation for the internet, it's very much applied for the regulation on the metaverse.
Okay.
Absolutely, and I think I concur on that, that it is required. We need to have proper regulations because you're looking at a generation that's going to come onto the platform, and you're going to have the same dilemma that you have today with the social networks. You're going to have problems in the metaverse as well. So.
All right. Well, thank you both for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you for the audience for answering the question. I really did enjoy this conversation about a space that I'm learning more about, but we're right on time. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Beth Flippo, CEO of Drone Express, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Mark Miller.
Thank you, Beth, for joining us here in Doha.
Thank you for having me.
So, Drone Express is an aviation company that's disrupting last-mile logistics by embracing autonomous flight deliveries. Drone Express is operated in limited fashion in Ohio with the American grocery company Kroger's and a well-known pizza chain in Atlanta, I believe. Mm-hmm. You're launching a project in Winston-Salem, which is in the state of North Carolina. But let's start with where does Drone Express fit within the logistics ecosystem? What is the problem you're solving, or what's the opportunity that you're embracing?
So drones are safer, they are faster, and they provide an eco-friendly delivery solution. And what that means is it's going to give local commerce a real opportunity to fight back against online shopping at this point. It will give them a way to do deliveries and get things out to people quickly in a way that's cost effective, that's never existed before. They've been fundamentally challenged by traditional delivery methods and waiting for trucks and waiting for routing software, and this will really give them a leg up.
So what's the size of the potential market for autonomous drone delivery? How big a market are we talking?
I mean, it's really unlimited, not just in the retail space of what can be delivered, but in construction, in medical. Drone delivery is going to infiltrate every aspect of our lives and do it in a way that, you know, really takes the strain off our environment and the way we've been doing it all these years. And it will really be an improvement across the board.
When we chatted last week about our conversation here, you mentioned something that I found really intriguing, which is what we're pushing is the autonomy economy. What is that? What do you mean by that?
So everybody talks about the gig economy. So basically, Amazon Prime has proven that people want unlimited delivery. They don't want to worry about tipping. They don't want to pay a per delivery fee anymore. So it's interesting that when it comes to local delivery, you know, things like DoorDash or Instacart, in the gig economy, you're still paying a per delivery fee plus a tip. Right. And the reason why is because when it comes to local delivery, the cost of every delivery changes everywhere you are. So the price of gas changes state to state. Local labor laws are changing city to city. The time and traffic can vary greatly depending on where you are. So how can you offer unlimited delivery if you don't know what those deliveries are going to cost? When it comes to drones, it is the exact same cost per delivery anywhere in the world, and it takes approximately the exact same time too. So we can offer on our marketplace unlimited delivery, just like Amazon Prime. Unlimited delivery, no minimum order quantities, and no tipping. And that is the autonomy economy. That is something that is going to change the way we shop, the way we live, and drones are going to be the first thing bringing it to us.
You founded the company, I believe, in 2018, and Drone Express has a really interesting origin story. I mean, I don't believe you, in the work that you were doing, you set out one day to create a drone company. You were doing something really different.
We were. I was actually working at the time for a family business that my parents started called Telegrid. It was founded back in 1984, and it was a communications equipment company for the military. And I'm an engineer. I specifically work on embedded platforms, so I build mobile operating systems. And one of the things I developed was a wireless mesh network with my team at Telegrid that allowed mobile platforms in the air and on the ground to communicate together. And we put it up on our webpage thinking the military is going to love this, and instead every drone manufacturer was contacting us for this radio. And I realized that we had something here. This was unique, but we had never done anything commercially before. So I told my dad, I said, I think we have an opportunity for a commercial spin-off. And he said, that's great. Find me somebody who wants this, and I will let you create it. So Amazon had just bought Whole Foods. So they were looking to use drones for grocery. So I started there, looking at all the grocery chains, and Kroger lit up off the map, really. I was back right outside of New York City where there isn't a Kroger. It was based purely on the numbers. Within 3 miles of every Kroger, you reach 100 million people. It's a third of the US population. Right. And that was before their merger with Albertsons. So I started stalking them full-time, driving my family and 4 children from New Jersey over to Cincinnati to be in the neighborhood. All of our family vacations were to Cincinnati. I hope they will forgive me one day. And
were you very popular with your children at this point?
You know, God bless them. They have a working mom, so I think they're used to it at this point. People were begging me to pick a smaller target. You know, my dad was saying, hey, you know, a hot dog vendor in the park, maybe anybody. But they really had the scale to be able to do this, and we started flying for them in 2021.
But go back to why is the radio part so important to your business and the idea for how you're going to scale your business?
So what makes this technology, the mesh, so incredible is it allows the drones to talk to each other in a local environment. They can share information, they can talk to each other about who's doing what delivery without having to go back over a cellular network and back into a cloud, which could slow it down. So our drones, and what makes them unique, is that they're hyper-utilized when it comes to delivery. So we do deliveries where one drone will be able to tell another drone, you know, this next delivery is mine, you're the closest, you're sitting on a perch where I need to be to do that delivery, you're already charged, you get up and move, I gotta be there. That kind of communication, that dance in the sky that these drones are gonna do is unlike anything that's seen today. In the gig economy right now, a human raises his hand and says, I'll take that order. He could be the farthest away. He could have accepted 3 orders already. We've all experienced it.
Yep.
Drones don't have any of that. They are constantly being moved and shifted and have their orders assigned to them in the most efficient way. That is where you're really going to see this kind of technology shine.
So at this point, or to this point, I should say, your operations have been limited in scale, I believe, because each drone has to be monitored by a human. Why is that?
So there is something called a Part 135, which is a domestic air carrier license, and it is the only in the United States. It is the only path to fly cargo for compensation in the national airspace system. It's the same certificate that American Airlines or FedEx receives. That's the only path and able to fly beyond the visual line of sight. And we're very lucky. We've been working with the FAA a very long time. And that is, without that, you are still required to have somebody on the ground monitoring the airspace. So we just recently had our Part 135 application accepted by the FAA, which was a very big deal, especially for someone of our size.
Right.
So we are finally able to get out there and really show what these machines can do.
And you said to me backstage that having the application accepted sounds like the beginning of the process, but it's really signaling the end, because you've been working with them for years to develop very extensive procedures, training manuals, et cetera. So you expect, you said, I think, to have the final certification in a couple of months?
Right. So now that the application has been accepted, that means all the manuals have been turned in. Now it's up to the specific operation, and we're going live in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, is our first operation. And that's where we're also going to launch our marketplace, which is our app where people are going to be able to shop for things that they need and get it delivered in 15 minutes.
So you said something backstage I thought was interesting too, which is, right now, if I want a toaster, I'll typically go on Amazon, of course, or Walmart, and I'll be looking up different toasters. But what your process will allow is for, a high quality, toaster store in Winston-Salem can sign up to be a part of your marketplace, right? And I can then get that in a very convenient delivery.
Right. Right now, if you needed a toaster, you would go on Amazon, you'd be presented with a bunch of toasters that are not as good quality. And even though there's a Williams-Sonoma that's right down the road that has a better quality, you're not going to go drive there. You're going to sacrifice the quality for your time. This is going to allow you to have both. You're not going to have to sacrifice quality anymore. You'll be able to get exactly what you need and get it that exact same day.
So I think at this point your drones can carry loads of up to 5 pounds,
right,
which doesn't seem like a lot. I've been to the grocery store with my sister who has 3 sons who eat a lot, and she'll cart home a huge amount of groceries. How do you solve for that then?
So I'm a working mother. I don't do the Sunday delivery anymore. I shop throughout the week for what I need when I need it. And that's fitting very much into the drone delivery model, where if you need something for dinner on Tuesday, you order it on Tuesday. And right now, a lot of us are still buying huge amounts of food on Sunday and throwing them out by Thursday. Drones are going to change the way that we live, so you don't have to buy it all in advance. You can buy it as you need it, which is going to be saving you money. It's going to be less waste, less packaging in our landfills. It's going to completely change the way we live if we're able to get anything we want in 15 minutes. No guilt. You just don't have the protein you need, ground beef, but you have everything else, you can just get that. And you're going to see a real shift in how people live.
Do you disrupt Amazon?
Local commerce, a way to get their goods out. We don't have to pay for a whole, distribution center. We are able to use Main Street as our distribution center and be able to get it to them faster. So why would you wait 2 days anymore for something if you can get it in 15 minutes? Amazon went into the drone business in the very beginning because they knew that this was their Achilles heel. If local stores are able to learn how to do delivery cheaper, it's going to change the game.
And where is Amazon in the drone game?
So they've been working, they're delivering in one location, but I think it's going to be just like any other disruptor in any other industry. It's a small company that comes in and shakes it up, and we think it's us.
So what do I pay as a consumer for this service?
So on our marketplace, $5.99 a month, you will get unlimited delivery. Anything you want, any time of day. And what's incredible is it delivers it to you. So just like Uber knows where you are, we will deliver wherever you are. We will know you're at your office. We will know if you're watching your kid's soccer game and you need water. We'll deliver to the field you are. If you're at home, we can even deliver to your backyard so you don't have porch pirates being a problem. There's so many things that it solves for that for $5.99 a month, I think people are going to adopt this very quickly.
And to participate in the marketplace, the retailers themselves will pay.
Right. So we are more of a B2B operation, and the retailers will pay to put their goods on our app, and you'll be able to see people ordering all times of day. You run out coffee creamer in the morning, 15 minutes later, it's at your door, and you don't have to skip that cup of coffee.
You are also looking at other markets. I believe you have a project that you're working on now in Saudi Arabia with NEOM.
Yes.
Explain that briefly.
So we are doing drone delivery for the NEOM project. The first island that's going live is Sindala, and that's why we're doing a lot of work in the Middle East and why I'm here. And always really loved this environment, and we're excited to be a part of this smart city. Really, the line, what they're planning for in Saudi Arabia is one of the greatest undertakings of humankind, and to be the exclusive drone supplier for drone delivery is really incredible.
But tell folks what you're actually going to be delivering. I love this, this detail.
We are going to deliver from the mainland to the island, and you think it's going to be just regular retail goods, but the amount of wealth of the people that are going to be staying at Sindala, I've been told things like, possibly $100,000 necklace or champagne or things like that will be transported. So it'll be interesting. It'll definitely be outside of what we deliver in the U.S.
You'll be sending the drones to someone's yacht.
Yes.
There.
They could land right on their yacht and get them right what they need.
And it's so exclusive, I think you said, like they don't allow delivery people, right? So the only way you can get it will be
right. They try to limit the amount of people that are on the island, and I think that's what makes it so exclusive. So with ours, we don't need to have any staff on the island. It just delivers it and returns back.
Right. Well, Beth, I can't wait for this to take flight in New York City, which I think might be its own special challenge too. But
well, I'm a New Yorker, so flying over the Hudson River is definitely a challenge that I want to solve, and I can't wait to bring it back to my home.
All right. Good luck. Thank you, Beth.
Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Andre Andonian, Chair of Asia Pacific and Strategic Advisor of Flagship Pioneering, Nisa Long, Managing Partner of Chiming Venture Partners, Samra Lezaik, Vice President and Head of the Global Health Unit of Bayer, and Dan Vadet, Founder and CEO of Fuma Therapeutics, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Bobby Ghosh.
Good evening. Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's been a day about, the theme of the day has been innovation, and we've heard about innovation in many different areas, but I can't think of any one area where innovation and the exciting new possibilities that come with innovation touch the lives of everybody in this room, everybody outside this room, everybody everywhere in the world. Healthcare, we've, even in the past few years, seen the possibilities of innovation. We've seen the innovation take on massive challenges, none bigger than the COVID pandemic, but plenty of other things. And we have an amazing panel that can unpack the possibilities and the potential of some of that innovation. Nisa, I'll start with you because you come to this from the investor's perspective. There's so much going on in so many areas within the healthcare field, As an investor, how do you make the decision how do you choose? How do you choose where, first of all, how do you know where to look, and then how do you choose where to invest?
Thanks, Bobby. I think, it's I've been involved with healthcare investment for the last 18 years, and it's great to see the development we've seen in the last, 15, 20 years and so forth. At the beginning, we would be looking at potentially areas that, when we first started in China and investing in areas where there's no Medtronic, there's no Pfizer and whatnot. So how do we provide basic services and care and drugs and devices to China? And as we continue to grow in the last 10 years, we started looking at innovation from all over the world. And we think about how do we use technology? How do we use the next dimensions of life science tools and whatnot to actually help our research institutions to develop beyond? So, we are one of the early investors in AI drug discovery, starting with the investment in Schrödinger in New York. And we were also an angel investor in Recursion out of Salt Lake City, and then followed by in silico and so forth. So, what's really interesting is now we're able to use AI to identify target and use AI to develop molecular structure. And now we have drugs in phase 2 clinical in US, with a pipeline of another 13 drugs in the pipeline, focus on unmet medical needs that previously we were not able to develop on our own. So now beyond that, we've actually started looking into, and we recently invested in a company. We're thinking, since we have so many targets coming out from AI, assets, we can't continue to rely on animal studies. That would be the bottleneck. So how can we use technology to combat that? So we recently invested in a spin-off from Harvard Medical School, WIS Institute, organs on a chip. So every chip is a different organ, including liver, that would test toxicity and so forth. So we're always thinking 5, 10, 20 years from now, what do we need?
And of course, this also greatly accelerates the process. If you don't have to do animal testing, there's the political dimension, there's a social dimension, there's an ecological dimension, but there's also the dimension of just blinding speed that you can achieve if you don't have to think about animals.
Yes, exactly. So, but of course, to see is, besides DNA sequencing, one of the areas, proteomics, is an area that we're also quite involved. So one of our companies out of Fremont, California, is the leading proteomics protein sequencing. So all of a sudden, instead of just looking at our DNA, we're looking at the 20,000, 30,000 proteins in our body, and how can we identify drugs a lot better and faster. And this includes neurological drugs, drugs focused on neurology and neuroscience that we previously were not able to develop.
And Andre, we were talking about proteins just before this discussion, so I know you will have something to add to that. But Flagship is unusual in that it's not an investor in other companies, it creates companies. It's a company that creates other companies. So you face a similar kind of challenge, but in a different way. How do you identify, again, in this big sort of spectrum of different possibilities, how do you identify where you want to put down your money and your intellectual capital, and where you want to set up a new company? The Moderna example may be one place to start.
Yeah, very happy to. So Flagship Pioneering is basically not a venture capital firm in the traditional sense, because we invest only in our own companies, in everything that comes out from the Flagship labs. Now the question is, what comes out there and how do we approach it? And here, I think, first of all, it starts with the aspiration. We have a process, it's called the pioneering process, and within that very core is the emerging discovery process. And I will explain. So the pioneering process allows us to create first-in-class multi-product bioplatform companies with the potential to transform human and planetary health. And we usually look at distant white spaces, where there is nobody, so we have a competitive advantage, where there is big potential, and if it works, we are basically there. We do that with a very disciplined process, and we call that emergent discovery, with so-called what-if questions. So we basically go future back and simply try to imagine a state. What if, let's say, Moderna's example, if the human can produce drugs in the body that helps, or even more specifically, if we can use mRNA platform to create miniature drug factories in the cells of the human. That was the original question of Moderna in 2010, and it was not even vaccine-based. It was in general for vaccines and therapeutics. And then basically we do iterations. We use the Darwinian law of natural evolution, of variant generation and selection. And very quickly we see that out of every year we have 100 of these questions. About 15 of them, if they graduate to so-called protocol companies, where we continue with the experiments. And if that works, that's where a new company is found. And that is being then continued to grow and become successful. So in terms of numbers, 100 explorations, 10 to 15 proto companies per year, about 6 to 8 companies are created.
Every year?
Every year. And Flagship, with this approach, has created 100 billion, or depending on valuations, up to 100 billion of aggregate value, 100 companies, with a committed own capital of 6.8 billion and about 28 billion from outside. Right. At the later stage that comes. And I think the important thing is we try to be very factual in the sense, so we do the killer analysis early, and even the companies in the protocol stage and early newco stage don't have a name, they have a number, just to avoid personal attachment.
Yeah. And so, Dan, your company comes in the therapeutics stage, for want of a better expression, you're in the middle of the science of it. You're in the middle of taking all this potential and making magic in the laboratory that we can all pin our hopes to. Talk us through a little bit about your process and the innovation that you're bringing to this sort of sequence of events: investor, company creation, and the lab.
Huma is all about accelerating adoption of digital and AI in the world of care and research. And this is really important because when you look into traditional medical work, research work, and science, it's hard to access everybody quickly. And we believe with digital and technology, you can touch everybody in a very consistent, cost-effective way. And that is why everything we do as a company, we want to be able to deliver it through a device like this, whether it is supporting you to be screened or diagnosed for cardiovascular disease, which is something that we have rolled out in the US a few months ago, and then 2 weeks ago we did it nationwide in Saudi together with our partner Bayer, to supporting a patient that goes through a complex cancer treatment and ensuring that that patient is the most optimized version of itself, obviously receiving different type of treatments, drugs, and so on. And we are more into managing the symptoms, the side effects, and keeping you really the best version of yourself as you go through this. Now, we believe with these new AI models being invented and being basically introduced to the world, we can make the care delivery almost consistent around the world. The same way that if you have a smartphone and it's some sort of internet connectivity, the poorest persons in the world to the richest persons in the world, as long as you have the device, you can have access to the same Google map, takes you from A to B exactly the same way. And we have achieved that already, obviously, in the context of map. And we think we can deliver that in the context of healthcare. And then the work that Flagship Pioneering, Nisa, and the team they're doing are really supportive of obviously enabling that vision, because we are more into the care pathway management rather than inventing the drug itself.
Yes, I should have been clear about that. A laboratory no longer has to be thought of as a sort of where biology is done. Yes. Data crunching is as much, and the use of AI is as much a part of this process now than as a medical lab. And then, Samer, you are where the rubber meets the road. Bayer is a full spectrum company, but you are in the delivery end of this process. With your role, you cover 56 countries, very different countries, and different challenges in the delivery. In the delivery end of it, what are the innovations that you are encountering, that you are using now, that help you get to past that last mile and into the village, the home, the family, to deliver the medicines, the therapies, the cures?
Well, thank you so much, Bobby. Probably the first thing that crossed my mind as you speak is something one of the former German chancellors said. Willy Brandt said, if I'm selling you, I speak your language. If I'm buying, dann müssen Sie Deutsch sprechen. Then you have to speak German, right? It all comes to really how are you going to talk to the customer eventually, and what is the best route to get to that place. Bayer has a very nice, relevant vision and mission statement. It's health for all, hunger for none. And this translates to the global health unit that I had into fostering inclusive growth. And with these 55+ countries that are in the low and middle income countries, we are anyway in an economic forum. I want to tell you one statistic. Imagine I tell you there is somewhere you can spend or invest $1 and it's going to get back to you 120. In 1994, the Copenhagen Conference estimate said if you spend $1 on female contraception in low middle income countries, it comes back with a total utility benefit for the society with 120. If you would put $1,000 in a bank, you will get 120,000. So, Bayer keeping that in mind, we try, for example, to focus on the area of family planning. Think of an example of India, a low middle income country, and there are about 450 million women in the reproductive age, where the word sex is a taboo. How do you reach this population? How do you speak the language? How do you make sure that you get to them? So one of the examples where you say the rubber hits the road, we have partnered with the UNFPA, United Nations Population Fund, and the Ministry of Health, and we have developed a chatbot where there will be complete, discreet communication with the young women who would need counseling. So they will be able to get unbranded education. This is part of the World Contraception Day and the your-life.com campaign that Bayer has been running. And the idea is, you want to make sure that you provide appropriate education. So this appropriate education transforms and translates into appropriate use of the relevant medication or prevention. If you are unable to reach this population, then they will not be able to get the information. 72% of micro-hold farmers in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia are females. Many of them get pregnant every 12 to 18 months. Yeah. If you give them the chance and empower them with the knowledge that they could get, so they would be able to control their fertility to the way they see fit, this immediately reflects on the well-being of their health, on their families, and on the economy. If the mom decides that she's going to have a child only every 3, 4, 5 years, what have you, imagine how would that be reflected into her efficiency, effectiveness, and the well-being of her current family. So this is one example, and we have a couple of more examples where we have sponsored a Ghana Heart Initiative, and we were able to sponsor electronic medical record keeping, where now, for the first time, they are able to track not only the acute diseases like HIV, but then they have extended it into non-communicable diseases. And Bayer has been sponsoring this for the past 5 years with partners, NGOs like GIZ from Germany.
I think, Andre, you wanted to come in.
You know, somewhere what you said triggered a thought of speaking the language of your client.
Yeah.
You can make the analogy also speaking the language of biology and applying, for instance, AI and software to it. And Nisa mentioned the importance, because that actually has been perhaps the missing part in the years. I have have a lot of experience outside biotech, where I have seen a lot of AI and also machine learning and software being applied. Like if you look at the phone in this industry, whereas in biology, it has been obviously very difficult because the understanding of biology is more complex, more dynamic.
Yes.
But now with, I would say, the computational power with AI, this is changing rapidly. And we have the opportunity to understand the biology and be able to actually produce programmable code-based medicine that actually exactly has an effect there where we want to have. And you can see the Moderna example that way, because it was the mRNA that was basically creating the protein sequence that was creating the protein. Yeah. And then there is now another example that's Generate Biomedicine that directly creates the protein. And Nisa mentioned that doesn't exist in the world, actually. These are artificial proteins with a desired function. Yeah. And this can accelerate and revolutionize the way drug development works, and the speed of it, the cost of it, everything, basically.
But yes, the science is there, the technology is available. We've actually seen some real-life examples of this being delivered. One of the traditional hurdles to rapid delivery of new drugs, new treatments, is government regulation. Nisa, from your perspective, since you look at a sort of really broad view of things, are governments getting better? Are governments getting quicker? Are governments using these technologies, not just accepting that those technologies exist, but themselves using these technologies to speed up the process of authorization and allowing trials to speed up and basically get these magic treatments to us as fast as possible?
You know, that's interesting. I think, in the prep discussion, we talked about this. Clinical trial in the last 15 years has actually doubled in time, and it's also become more costly.
Yeah.
And I think one of the issues also we talked about, and this time it's very interesting, we brought a group of CEOs with us to MENA on this trip, because there was also a few healthcare conference. And we talked to different government organizations and exploring the possibility of, do we really need a lot of the developing countries, do we really need them to wait until US FDA approval, CE mark approval, until they actually approve the drugs? And I think same thing for Southeast Asia. We recently talked to the APAC, whether or not this is something that they would consider maybe actively also looking at approving first-in-class drugs at some point. So the ability to approve new drugs and innovative drugs in the different countries, if we can expedite that, that would actually be really great. Because one of the issues is we're also starting to see, and we have invested in digital clinical trial companies, and it's a company that's actually a spun-off from IQVIA, so that we can help reduce the amount it takes a clinical trial, and then also so that we don't have to check all the data that perhaps would be incorrectly put together by certain hospitals and whatnot. So I think we're finding lots of different ways to try to expedite, especially since during COVID we saw an inequity for COVID vaccine. How can we expedite? And I think one of the theses for us investing always is how do we invest in companies that can develop affordable and innovative healthcare for the world? So
are some countries, some governments better than others at this? Would you think of some countries as being best in class at speedy approval, speedy sort of permissions and
Yes, definitely. I think U.S. FDA has always been the gold model, and then of course, CE, EMEA, Japan, and so forth. But I do encourage, if the MENA countries want to become a biotech hub, perhaps the Ministry of Health can also think about developing and building a panel with that expertise.
If I may just bring us back again a little bit to the weeds, because this is absolutely for the spearhead of all the innovation. I share Dan's passion for having solutions that will be completely delivered through an iPhone or a phone. One of the learnings that we have found out through the Ghana Heart Initiative sponsorship over the years and the work in India, most of the time the healthcare providers, I mean, if there are investors out there who want to spend money well spent, they're using their own phones or iPads or something that would be incompatible with the electronic medical records that we try to help them develop. If someone would like to spend something on a development in a low-middle income country, it could be a very simple solution. You don't need a space shuttle to go from Manhattan to New Jersey. A cab would be fine. A small computer here or there could make a big difference for a whole village or a whole community. Just bringing it back again to the weeds.
No, I appreciate that, because my question to both of you, but Dan, you could take this first if you like. What are the challenges at the other end in getting medical professionals to adapt to these new ideas and new technologies? I mean, I have, this is very, I'm simplifying this a little bit, but when I have conversations with my doctor in New York City, he's very skeptical about all of this AI. He's very old school, and he's an older gentleman, and he's familiar with ways of doing things. He's aware that these new things exist, but he's not interested. And if that's the case in New York City, what is the experience in developing countries, in far-flung places where, medical professionals are few and far between?
Sure. I think going back to Sam's comment on you have to speak the language, whatever solutions needs to create value for everyone's involved. One part of it is the reimbursement. If there isn't a reimbursement for a new way of doing things, that reimbursement not only should cover the cost of the technology, but also should deliver value and basically money to the people that they're driving it. And historically, a lot of emphasis was, okay, we're going to get a reimbursement for the technology, and then doctors or nurses, they were like, we are putting time, no one pays for it. So speaking the language and having the considerations for the whole ecosystem is one part. But the most important part, and I think that is something that lots of technology companies, we all invent something and we expect people to adopt. We need to be mindful. When you enter into a regulated, conservative industry, you better to bring a technology that is 10x better. If it is like 10% better, forget it. 40% better, forget it. And that's one of the things that, as we built Huma cloud platform, which got FDA approval and so on, we started thinking that half of the healthcare cost is the labor cost, which half of that is the doctors and nurses, let's say, going with the US stats. And is there a way, if I provide my technology, provide also a delightful experience? We partnered with Google 18, 19 months ago. We built new AI models based on the technologies that people now know, ChatGPT and so on, foundational model, to create a concept called 10x nurse, which is, I'm a nurse using this technology right now, look after 200 patients. Can I look after 2,000 patients, working less?
Yes.
Not being bogged into all the bureaucracy, finding this data, that data, writing the report, and everything happens like this. And since we have rolled out the solutions in the US, we have seen a massive uptake. And for an experiment, one of the philosophy we have at Huma is like, if you want to test if a feature works, turn it off to see if people get pissed off. If you turn off something and then suddenly you're getting a call, what happened? That means there is something in it. So to wrap your questions, the solutions that we create and the technology to be adopted, it has to bring a massive value. And it took us 10 years to get to here. And I believe we have actually another 20 years. When I started Huma, the vision always was a 30 years vision. Right. If you want to make the world the most advanced digital-first world for care and research, that is a 30 years journey.
We could have actually gone on talking all afternoon, but the clock is flashing. We are out of time. I will encourage the audience afterwards to reach out to all of the panelists, because there's a great deal more to be said here. But I'm glad that we were able to end not just today, but this three-day event, this three-day forum, on such an optimistic and positive note. Ladies and gentlemen, your panel.
Now, as we wrap up our last day here at the Qatar Economic Forum, I'd like to thank all our speakers and everyone here today. Across the last 3 days, we've had unparalleled discussions driving global boardroom conversations and money markets. And I'm sure you'll agree that we've had some really fascinating insights.
And in addition to our innovation partner, QRDI, I'd like to thank all of our official partners, the Ministry of Commerce and Industry of the State of Qatar, and Media City Qatar, and our premier sponsors, Qatar Investment Authority and QNB. Well, it has Linda and myself, our utmost pleasure hosting you here in Doha for the 4th installment of the Qatar Economic Forum. We wish you safe travels ahead and look forward to welcoming you back here, same place, next year. Shukran wa ila liqa.